Hey there, we're going to be looking at the Twisted Fusion trade today. The regular Fusion trade requires that the moving averages are in order. So we've got the short-term moving averages and the long-term moving averages. The short-term is the 13 and the 34 together, and the long-term is the 34 and the 136 together. And with the Twisted Fusion trade, what we're looking for is a twist in that short-term set of moving averages. We're looking for the moving averages to start out in order, but then that short-term set of moving averages twist and they become out of order. And we can actually take advantage of this twist. So we can see there's a twist in the market here. There's a twist in the market here. If I take a look at the Euro Yen, we can see there's a twist up in here in a short market and a twist here. And again, we're going to take advantage of these twists. So let's go back to the US dollar Japanese yen. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a slide up that comes right out of the manual. So we'll go over the 6 steps to trading this Twisted Fusion. So I'm going to do that. We'll go through the steps and then I'll show you those steps on this chart. Step number 1 is to identify the trend. So we want the short-term trend being up, the 13 EMA above the 34 EMA. We want the long-term trend also being up, the 34 EMA being above the 136 EMA. Then step number 2 is we're looking for the setup. The long-term trend stays up. That's the 34 EMA remaining above the 136 EMA, but the short-term trend turns down. The 13 EMA is below the 34 EMA. And what this is going to do is put the red line in between the blue lines. That's the easiest way to remember that. Step number 3 is the signal. We're going to enter the buy trade when the price closes above the 34 EMA. The dots need to appear below the price and the RSI is going to be above the 50 level. Step number 4 is the stop loss. The stop loss is placed just below the most recent green dot that appears below the price. And step number 5 is a target. Now the take profit is going to be 2 to 1, but we can use the 1.5 to 1 if we're finding that the market just isn't moving as far as we'd like. Step number 6 is trade management. The stop loss moves to just under each new green dot as each new green dot appears. So let's go to the chart. So we're at the US dollar Japanese yen. I'm going to zoom in just a little bit and we'll take a look at that process again. Step number 1 is identify the trend. And in here we've got the short-term trend above the long-term trend. So we have those moving averages in order. 13, 34, 136. Step number 2 is the setup. We're looking for the twist in this case. So we're looking for the short-term trend to turn down. And that happens when the 13 EMA drops below the 34 EMA. But the long-term trend stays up. So we want that 34 EMA to remain above the 136 EMA. So the signal in this case is when a candle closes above that 34 EMA. And we get that right in here. This little candle closes above the 34 EMA, or it closes above all of the moving averages. It's just free and clear at this point of all the moving averages. So that is step 1 of the signal. Next, we need the dots to be underneath the price, and we have that here. And I'll draw a line so we can see all the way through. And finally, we want the RSI to have moved above 50. And we do have the RSI just slightly moving above the 50 level. So with all of those criteria met, we can place a long trade. Now a long trade would be placed at the close of the candle. So I'm just going to put a line on that chart, the close of the candle here, and the stop loss would go just underneath that candle's dot. And from here, I'm going to remove these levels, see where they are, and I'm going to use my Fibonacci tool. So we'll remove the levels, get my Fibonacci tool. I'm going to start where the entry would be, move down to where the stop loss would be, and from here I can see the 1-to-1 level. This is where I would move my stop loss to break even. The 1.5 to 1 level, so this is target number 1, and the 2 to 1 level, this is the ultimate target in this case. Now as this trade progresses, we're going to be taking our stop loss, and the original stop loss goes underneath that first dot. Next candle opens, and then the stop loss gets placed underneath the next dot, and these dots will progressively get higher and higher, and as each new candle appears, the stop loss gets placed underneath each new dot. So I can use my arrow tool. I used that in the last video, so I'll do that here. And with this arrow tool, I can better show where the stop loss would go. So let's get rid of the Fibos list. So I can place my stop loss underneath the dot, and then as the next candle opens, a new dot appears, and then the stop loss gets moved to underneath the new dot. And this happens over and over and over again. Now, I'm going to put my fib back on. What will happen is when the price touches this 1-to-1 level, this is my break-even level, what I will be doing is taking my stop loss from where it is underneath whatever current dot it's under and moving it to break even. So in this case, the very next candle gets us to 1-to-1. So from here, I get to move my stop loss to the entry level. And then I am waiting at this point. We'll get rid of the fib tool because I want to keep this clean and easy to look at. This is my entry price. I want to keep my stop loss at break even until the dots move ahead of where that current stop loss is. So it won't be until over here that I can start to resume moving my stop loss. And this is going to play out this way until the trade closes. The trade is going to close either by hitting the stop loss or the take profit. And we have another trade in here. I don't need to go through the rules quite the same way. You'll see how this works though. We've got the ordered phase. All the moving averages are in order. The twist happens in here where the 13 drops below the 34. We get the signal to go long on not quite this candle here because the three criteria haven't been met. We have the close above the 34, great. We've got the dots showing up underneath the price, great. But the RSI has not moved above the 50 level yet. So in this case, I want to wait until the next candle closes. It brings the RSI above the 50 level, and then all three criteria are met, so we can place the trade at this point. Stop loss underneath its dot. The 1-to-1 is where the market will break even, where I'll take my stop loss and move it to break even. 1.5-to-1, this could be where target number 1 is, or 2-to-1, where the ultimate target would be. So let's take a look at this on a short trade. So this is the Euro Yen, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to put a slide up on the screen, and we'll go through the rules really quick, and then follow those rules using these examples. Step number 1 is to identify a downtrend. The short-term trend is down, 13 EMA is below the 34 EMA. The long-term trend is down, 34 EMA is below the 136 EMA. Step number 2 is the setup. So we're looking for the long-term trend to stay down. The 34 EMA is below the 136 EMA. The short-term trend turns up. The 13 EMA is above the 34 EMA. And this puts the red line in between both of the blue lines. Step number 3 is the signal. We're going to enter the sell trade when the price closes below the 34 EMA. The dots appear above the price and the RSI drops below the 50 level. It doesn't have to drop below the 50 level. It could have always been below the 50 level, but it's the fact that it's underneath that 50 level. Step number 4 is the stop loss. We place the stop loss just above the most recent red dot. And step number 5 is the target. The take profit level is 2-to-1, but if we're finding the market just isn't moving far enough for a lot of these, we can use 1.5-to-1. And finally, step number 6 is trade management. The stop loss moves to just above each new red dot as each new dot appears. So let's go to the chart, and we'll look at this as an example. So we've got a couple examples to work out really nice. So let's zoom into this first example. We start out with number 1. Moving averages are in order. Short-term trend, long-term trend is down. Step number 2 is that short-term trend twist. We get that red moving average in between both of the blue moving averages. That short-term trend turns up while the long-term trend remains down. Number 3 is a signal. We want to see that a candle closes below the 34 EMA, that the dots appear above the candle, and the RSI drops below 50. And on this candle here, we have all of that. So on the one candle, we get the close below the 34, the dot is above the candle, and the RSI drops below the 50 level. So we're going to be entering a trade at this point, and we'll be looking to place our stop loss just above that first dot. So I'm going to take my Fibonacci tool and draw this out here. This is where I would enter. This is where my stop loss would be. This line here is the 1-to-1, so I would move my stop loss to break even when we get to that 1-to-1 level. So we have that first target level of 1.5 to 1 and the second target level of 2-to-1. Now we're going to manage the trade with these dots. So as each new dot appears, let me get my arrow tool, wrong one. We're going to start with that original dot. As candles open and we get new dots, the stop loss is going to follow along these dots, and it's going to reduce the risk on the trade as the trade progresses. Now in this case right here, we have a candle that hits 1-to-1, and with that I will move my stop loss to the entry level to break even, and then we wait until a dot moves below that break even level before we start adjusting the stop loss again. So at this point here, we get a dot that drops below that entry level, and I can start to move the stop loss again, and we'll follow the stop loss down until the trade is closed. The trade is going to be closed in one of two ways. It's going to be closed because your stop loss got hit, or it's going to be closed because your take profit gets hit. So let's just clean this up, and we have a second twisted trade here. Again, the same rules apply. We have a downtrend where we have a technical downtrend. The moving averages are in order, and then the short-term trend turns up. The red moving average is in between the blue moving averages. Then from there, we get a candle that closes below all the moving averages. So technically, it closes below the 34. And at this point, we have all the criteria met. There is a red dot above the price. There is that move below the 50 level. Now, it's just below the 50 level, but it counts. So from here, we would place our stop loss just above that red dot. I'm going to pull out my Fibonacci tool. And again, we're going to do the exact same thing. The 1-to-1, this is where I move my stop loss to break even. Now, I've said this in the videos. It's not in the manual. You can choose to do this or not. In a particularly choppy market, what this is going to do is have you moving your stop loss to break even, and then you'll get chopped out of the trade, but you won't lose anything. This is a really nice way to prevent bigger hits from your trade. This is something that I like to do, and it's something that I'll do as often as I can. So we've got that 1-to-1 where we move our stop loss to break even, that 1.5 or 1.5 to 1, that is an optional target number 1, and the ultimate target number 2 is that 2-to-1. Now, we're not always going to get a winning trade like this. We're not always going to get 2-to-1. We're not always going to get 1.5 to 1. Sometimes the best we'll do is be able to move the stop loss to break even, but that's okay. That is part of this. This is what this process is all about. We want to limit the risks on the trade by reducing the stop loss or moving to break even, and from there, what we do profit won't always be 2-to-1, but then the next trade will catch up, and then we combine a couple trades to get that 2-to-1. So this is the twisted trade. Oh, I'm going to take a look at this one. I'm not going to keep you too much longer, but I'm going to take a look at what we were just talking about here. This is a trade that happens, but it just doesn't go very far. And we'll zoom in on this. We'll take a look at how it happens when we don't get everything that we're looking for in a trade. So we have, again, the rules all apply. Downtrend, twisted section in here, the close below the 34. The entry is at the close of that candle. The stop loss is just above the dots. and we could see, and in this case, we do not get to break even. We don't get that far. The price just does not move that far. But we are managing the trade along the way. So with the original trade, the stop loss is here. I'm going to mark all of this stuff up so we can see once I pull the Fibonacci tool off. Stop loss was up top, entry was down here, the last dot was right here. So I'm going to get rid of this Fibonacci tool, and we can see that the stop loss started out up top and it got all the way down to the bottom. So we managed to reduce the risk on the trade from 60 pips to 12 pips. And that is a very good risk reduction. We've reduced the risk on the trade by 3/4. So the next trade we take that has any kind of profit to it, we're going to make that back with very little problem. So this is risk management. This is important to your overall success. So this is the Twisted Fusion trade. We looked at the buys, we looked at the sells. This is a really nice, simple way to trade the Fusion system, and I hope you have the best of luck trading this method.